Hey again everyone. Today we're taking a close look at deep cleaning a PlayStation 3 fat model. This is a CECHK01, a non-backward compatible model that was originally released with an 80GB hard disk and is reasonably prone to overheating related yellow light of death issues. I'll link the PS3 console buyer's guide in the description so you can compare the various versions in detail, but this was released in the middle of the PS3's lifecycle and has the 65nm chips, so it runs a little toasty. Since this is such an old console that has been working well, it's pretty unlikely that the CPU or GPU will need to be reballed. That seems counterintuitive, but I haven't come across many PS3 consoles these days that still have overheating issues. I suspect they've mostly been filtered out by the dumpster. If it was going to have a manufacturing-related defect, it probably would have shown by now. Under heavy use, it sits at around 68 degrees, which is within safe limits, but makes the fan spin up like it's overcompensating. So I'm going to go over the disassembly and cleaning, replace the external thermal paste, reassemble it, test it out, and then finish with a little demo of scratch removal, using a couple of easy-to-find polishing compounds. Along the way, we'll check if delidding the chips might be needed down the line, but spoiler, I'm skipping doing it here. It's risky, and with no spare console, it's not worth chancing a brick when things are stable after cleaning. On the side is the hard drive access plate that can be removed with a plastic spudger. The drive tray should be secured with a blue Phillips screw, but it's missing here, which means it was probably missing when I got this unit. And the warranty seal has been tampered with, so this one has been opened before. Let's hope there aren't too many surprises within. There should be a rubber stopper under the sticker, and a T8 Torx screw here to secure the lid. This one has been modded, and I upgraded the hard drive to 1TB. I can't imagine suffering with an 80GB drive in the PS3 era. After removing the screw, slide the top cover in the direction of the screw hole. It should come off with light pressure. No matter how delicately you treat one of these, eventually the top is probably going to look like this. I won't be doing a complete scratch removal later because my joints are killing me, but I will show you two easy to find scratch removers that will do a decent job if you put in the manual labor. With the cover off, you should see 7 Phillips screws, 6 longer ones around the edge and 1 shorter near the back bend and case clip. The 7 longer screws here could get mixed up with the 4 longer ones for the power supply later, so I try to keep them organized. Resist the temptation to turn the PS3 upside down if a screw gets stuck. The disk drive isn't secured, so it could in theory pop the clip on the back and tear the ribbon cable. Use a magnetized screwdriver tip or small magnet. Press the plastic tab in the upper right with a spudger to release the clip, then hinge the top forward toward the front buttons. With the top off, unplug the optical drive power cable from the main board. And then tip the optical drive up from the front to find the ribbon cable. The ribbon cable is secured by a sticker. Peel it slowly from one corner and carefully fold it back. Don't continue peeling the sticker if the covering of the ribbon cable begins to tear away. If you can't get the adhesive to peel away, try warming it a little with your hand or a hairdryer. Unclip the ribbon cable and remove the drive. Remove the white 2-pin AC plug from the rear of the power supply by pressing down on the plastic clip. The power supply is supposed to be secured with, 4 screws maybe? There were only 2 holding my power supply in, so I'm guessing someone did a power supply swap on this at some point. That would explain the lifted seal sticker and all of the missing screws. Anyhow, remove the Phillips screws from your power supply. Use a plastic spudger to lift a corner of the power supply, but don't wiggle around that ribbon cable or it might tear. The power supply is mounted on 2 metal prongs, so after lifting it off the base, wiggle it off with your hands. It can be very snug, but pull straight up without twisting to avoid bending the prongs. Remove the screws from the metal shield. I probably did this in reverse order, but it doesn't matter all that much. Someone has definitely been inside this unit though. There seem to be a few missing screws, but it looks like the antenna wire is still taped down from the factory. That means it's pretty unlikely that anyone's looked at the main board and changed the thermal paste. Remove the screws on the metal shroud on the Wi-Fi and USB board and unplug the antenna wire from the board. The small circular antenna wire connectors can be pretty tight, so it's probably a good idea to loosen it with a spudger to avoid damaging the connector or wire. And unclip the ribbon cable from the Wi-Fi board. Remove the Wi-Fi USB board and put it aside. Remove any remaining screws on the hard disk holder and put the hard disk holder aside. Remove the antenna board and separate the antenna wire from the main board. Just tear through the tape and retape it later to make your life easy. There are 4 screws holding the tension clips for the CPU and GPU. Remove those and the tension clips. Double check that you've removed all of the screws. Once they're out, the board is in theory detached from the heat sinks. It is probably still stuck from the old thermal paste though. You may have an easier time removing the main board if you take off the top upper metal shield. Unplug the fan from the main board if you haven't already. To release the board, I tend to wiggle my fingers around the edges of the case to loosen it, then lift from the back where the power plug is and lift upward to peel it off the heat sinks. This is very dry thermal paste, flaky even, but that doesn't mean it isn't still somewhat effective. This system wasn't overheating yet. You can see a dark patch on the old thermal paste. Heat is probably pooling there, causing that discoloration, and it's become dried and caked on. This is where I would say that this system, if I wanted to risk it, would be worth delidding. Since I don't have a spare system, and I don't have a jig tool, I'm not taking a chance. I just want to play Super Puzzle Fighter 2 HD Remix, not spend all afternoon resoldering surface mount capacitors I accidentally smashed off the board with a painter's knife or something. The system was stable between 65 and 68 degrees when running intense games like Blur or Modern Warfare 3 with a medium-high fan. If there were temperature spikes, that would suggest that heat can't be removed from the chips, and it would absolutely need to be delidded because the old thermal paste has failed entirely. But, a little spoiler for later, the system runs very quiet after replacing the thermal paste, so delidding this isn't an emergency. To remove the thermal paste, use cotton balls or makeup removal pads and isopropyl alcohol. All I had handy was 70% rubbing alcohol, but I usually prefer the 91% isopropyl alcohol for cleaning. There was a lot of thermal paste on here. I have a limited number of cotton balls, and it was very dry, so this took a while. Also, my hot water tank exploded as I started doing the video, so apologies for the clutter and tight video framing. I had nowhere to put anything once the water started flowing. The old thermal paste needs to be removed to a level where you'll be able to read the text on the chips. After getting the surface cleaned up, I like to use a cotton swab or the end of a spudger to try to pick up any little flecks of dried old thermal paste. I usually use a small paintbrush for dusting, but didn't have one handy. Remove the dust bunnies with something soft. You don't want to be trying to resolder surface mount capacitors. And while this is open, I might as well replace the CR2032 backup battery for the date and time, because I think the old one is going to leak soon. It's starting to look a little bit puffy. Use a plastic spudger to push the tiny clip on the right-hand side of the battery holder, and the old battery should pop right out. Put the new one in with the flat side up. To clean the fan and heat sinks, remove the 4 screws around the housing and then lift it off. The heat sinks can be sharp and the fins are fragile, so be careful and don't cut yourself. They're each slotted onto 2 plastic pegs. If yours are extremely filthy, wash them in warm water and let them dry. Mine were just a little dusty actually, a lot cleaner than I expected. The bottom plastic shell, top cover, and top shell can all be rinsed under warm but not hot water and air dried. So away I go with them to do that. My fan was also pretty clean, but it seems to have been coated in several summers worth of forest fire smoke. To clean that, I use cotton swabs dipped in generic ammonia-based window cleaner. Brush off any big clumps of dust, and then use as many cotton swabs as needed to clean all of the surface area of the fins. Just be careful not to put pressure on the fan blades or it could bend and become off-center. I lost the recording of me putting the heat sinks back into the casing. The important thing is to make sure that the pair of holes is slotted onto the plastic pegs. They should be aligned so that there's a slight space between the heat sinks, about 1 millimeter. Wiggle them side to side when you think you've got them in. They shouldn't shift around. Replace the 2 screws at the front of the fan assembly. Put the rear panel back in, and then replace the back screws. Now that the base is back together, we can use it as a platform to keep the mainboard flat while applying new thermal paste. Replace the top metal shield by threading the ribbon cable through the slots to protect the board. Slide the top of the shield back on and close it up. I grabbed a few tubes of thermal paste when getting my things together for this little project. You might see that white tube of silicone thermal paste in and out of the video frame. I don't know why I have that stuff. I haven't used that in probably 20 years. That silicone compound thermal paste is fairly awful in terms of conductivity, and I think it would easily overheat this PS3. Looking it up, it seems to have about 1/9 of the thermal conductivity of modern carbon and magic pixie dust based thermal pastes. For actual useful thermal paste, I had the choice between Noctua NTH1 or Thermalright TF4. I chose the Noctua just because I've heard it stays fluid longer. With any luck, I'll never need to open the system again. To apply the thermal paste, I like the 5 dots method. Theoretically, it doesn't need to be spread, but I still do it. If you apply enough paste, the force of the heatsink is supposed to spread the paste. I've always needed to use a little more paste with the fat PS3s than I would on a PC CPU, for example. I think those tension screws just don't squeeze things as hard as some of the complex CPU cooler attachment mechanisms these days. I've put it on reasonably thick, so the bit just on the edge will end up covered once the heatsink comes down on it. To spread the paste, I usually find a piece of waxed cardboard packaging from something and tear off little squares. Once the thermal paste is applied, pop the assembled mainboard back into the base with the rear side first and lower it into the front. Replace the medium-sized short Phillips topped screws to secure the shield. Put the tension clips back in place and screw the 4 screws back in. Alternate tightening the tension clip screws so the pressure is applied evenly as the heatsink is squeezed down. Put the Wi-Fi USB board back in place, replace the Wi-Fi board shield, and put the hard disk holder back in place. Resecure them with the smaller Phillips head screws. And I'll reinsert the hard drive now, just so I don't risk knocking it off my desk or stepping on it. Reattach the Wi-Fi antenna to the Wi-Fi board, replace the antenna board, screw it down, and tape down the antenna wire. Plug the Blu-ray drive ribbon cable back into the underside of the drive. Resecure it with the sticker, and if the adhesive is worn out, use a small piece of tape that will be easy to remove in the future. Reseat the drive and plug the optical drive power cord back in. Plug the fan back into the mainboard, and reseat the power supply on the prongs. Screw the power supply back in with, well, I had 2 long Phillips head screws, but you might have 4. Replace the top of the case with the front side first, and pivot the back down to secure the case clip. I'm not locking the top panel back on yet with the screw because I want to do a little scratch removal. I'm a little too sore to do a full demo on this, but I want to show a little these buffing compounds that I use to repair a lot of plastics. Mainly, I want to demonstrate that they aren't going to ruin the top of this thing by putting swirls all over it like some other products. Well, unless they've changed the formulations or something. Always test on a small area first. And here's how it's been running after a dusting and upper thermal paste replacement. There are a couple generally easy to find scratch removal compounds that may work to buff out the surface scratches. You can often find both of these at big box retailers or any large online megastore. Novus Scratch Remover comes with a light and heavy buffing compound and a surface cleaner. I don't really use the cleaner often, but I haven't had any issues with it discoloring or damaging any plastics. It works well enough to get off the surface grime. Just make sure there are no dust particles on the surface before you use any scratch remover, or you're just introducing more scratches. Use a soft, non-absorbent cloth like a microfiber cloth if you have one. If you don't, a cotton cloth will work too, but you'll need to use more product as some will absorb. You may find a cotton cloth works better on harder plastics, as the product seems to concentrate the buffing particles as the moisture is absorbed into the cloth. Test the compound in a small area first to make sure it isn't going to ruin your plastic. Apply some to the cloth and rub in small circles, applying light pressure, just enough that you feel a little friction. If you feel the plastic getting warm, buff slower or move on to a new area. Warming up a lot of plastics, particularly translucent ones like the PS3 lid, will often turn them opaque and make it look splotchy. I find that the heavy scratch remover is often too coarse for high gloss plastics, requiring a lot of extra buffing time. I'm just going to use a light scratch remover on one side here. On the other side, I'll use some Megware's Ultimate Compound. I use this for a lot of plastic buffing jobs, from things like this to repairing the surface of optical media. If I had to choose one product over the other, it would probably be the Megware's Ultimate Compound. One bottle does so many different jobs, so it's hard to beat. But if you can only find the Nova Scratch Remover in a place like a big box store automotive department, it'll probably get the job done. This lid needs a lot more work, as you can tell, but the fine surface scratches are gone and a lot of the sheen is back. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button or leave a comment. The interaction really helps out the channel a lot in the recommendation algorithm. Videos like this don't really get a lot of traffic, but I enjoy making them. And working on videos has been a welcome distraction from my deteriorating health, but they don't really get seen unless they get the interaction bump. Thank you to everyone that helped get the fan replacement on the RTX 3060 video out there. And sincerely, thank you to everyone that has subscribed over the years that this channel has been around. I've been having some rough days with my health, and the silly YouTube message about hitting 3,000 subscribers really brightened up the day. If anyone needs anything that may have been hosted on my website, email me. I may have it somewhere, but a lot of the notebooks and Python scripts and whatnot are probably only on archive.org now. I had to let the domain and hosting expire because I couldn't really justify the cost. Well, that's plenty of rambling for today. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.